a lot of the questions that I get and a lot of the research that I do is based on questions from students. This is slightly different. The UFO phenomena is not something I had heard about until I heard of Dr. Hugh Ross at Reasons to Believe. And he had to deal with these issues in an apologetic sense. And he asked if I would be interested in co-authoring a book with he and Kenneth Samples on this subject, but particularly from my perspective, national security, government bureaucracy, conspiracy thinking, and the like. So a lot of my background leads into this. Plus, I am an elder at a church. I've been teaching at a local church for almost 30 years.
Excellent. That's awesome. And the book that Dr. Clark is referring to, I'm looking at right now. I have it on Logos as well here, another digital version, and I encourage you to get it. It is called Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men. Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men. You contributed 2 chapters to that book, I believe. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, we shared in all the conclusions that all of us came to, but there's bigger than 3 parts. They did more. Hugh Ross did the astronomy, the physics of the universe. Kenneth Samples did a lot on the occult, the cultic aspects of it, the abductees, the ufology behind it. But I focus more on where my area of expertise is, which is government conspiracies, government cover-ups. Is there a cover-up, classified research, and the like.
That was your role in the book, Dr. Clark. What is your role at Reasons to Believe, the apologetics organization there in Southern California?
I am what's called a visiting scholar, a local visiting scholar, although right now I'm neither visiting nor local because I'm in Colorado and no one can visit because of the pandemic. So I'm doing it remotely. I do a lot of blog spots, some short videos, some interviews, podcasts, social, critical thinking in the age of social media on the book of Daniel. I'm actually researching a book on the book of Daniel, the politics of Daniel, how he thought about politics during his era.
Yeah, that's your next major project. You're going to drop a book, a commentary. What can we expect from your work on Daniel?
Sure, it's more of a book, and it's using what I call abductive reasoning rather than the scientific method of deductive or inductive. Abductive is considering alternative hypotheses, weighing the evidence against them, and finding out which hypothesis makes the most sense. Because the people, a lot of moderns challenge the idea that prophecy can occur or ever did occur. But there's also some kind of short anomalies in the book of Daniel. So I want to look at it and evaluate it from that. But what's fascinating to me is that Daniel, a lot of people grow up hearing stories of Daniel in the lion's den, and they think it's a children's book. But this is a very grown-up story about a very young man who gets taken captive to a foreign country early in his life, is probably made a eunuch, which is castration. He suffered some kind of trauma, and yet he evinces none of that. In fact, he is a very humble and obedient person. And the reason for that, I think, is because he paid attention to prophecy in the past, and Isaiah, almost 100 years before, had prophesied that Cyrus, eventually would come after to conquer the Babylonians. But once the Babylonians came in, he says this in Isaiah 49:6, "It is too small a thing for you to be my servant, to restore the tribes of Jacob, to bring back those of Israel I have kept. I will also make you a light to the Gentiles, that you may bring about my salvations to the end of the earth." I believe, in the thesis of my book, is that because Daniel committed to God's kingdom purposes during his day, he models how we may be committed to God's kingdom purposes for our day. And just as Daniel was experiencing traumatic political events, world events in his day, the subjugation of Judah to Babylonian control, the eventual subjugation of Babylon to Persia, captivity. We are experiencing trauma in our day, with all that's going on with the pandemic, the street protests, you name it. And so how can we think about those things, and what models do we have in the ancient world that can help us think clearly and accurately about how to think and how to behave politically in this world?
Excellent. Looking forward to that. But now let's look backwards. Let's look backwards to Roswell. Do Christians really need to know what really happened at Roswell?
I think it's important to be aware. Here's why. Over 50% of Americans consistently poll that either they believe in or they know someone that believes in UFO phenomena. So at least half the country, half of our population, so 170 perhaps million, have either believe in it or know someone that believes in it or has an experience with it. So yes, I think Christians do need to know, to equip themselves, how to address the whole subject of UFO phenomena.
All right, so we are going to address it today, and part of what we're going to speak about is classified information. And this has to do with your specialty, and it has to do with some of the things you wrote in the book. Talk about classified information as it relates to the UFO phenomenon.
Sure. The basic idea is that any government needs to have some level of confidentiality about what it's doing. And confidentiality, not so much from the American people, but from our foreign enemies. But because we're an open society, they can read anything and everything, so they have to classify. And they have varying levels. So from confidential, no foreign, which means no foreign eyes on it, to secret, to top secret. And then it goes up even from there. And some of it includes what we call compartmented information. That is to say, if you and I both had top secret clearances for intelligence, and yet we have different compartments, I would have the need to know what you know, and vice versa. And the purpose of that is to preclude a foreign adversary from penetrating deeply enough and gathering all of our intelligence until such things happen like the Edward Snowden event. They take classified information and send it abroad and then expose it. So a lot of our government information is classified. Is it all legit? Probably not. But no one disagrees with the fact that some of it should be, and maybe large sections of it. So classified information plays into this because a lot of times the government will be put into position of saying, having to lie. Are you working on something out at Area 51? No, can't tell you. We don't want foreigners coming in. Let me give you a really good example of why that's important. In the early 80s, the Soviets, then Soviet Union, were caught. A couple of them were coming across as aviation and aerospace engineers, and they were given tours of various aviation facilities in San Diego area. And when they came out, they watched them, and it sounded funny the way they were walking. So some of the security guards around them asked them to look at their shoes, and they were covered with duct tape, reversed. And they were picking up materials from the floor because they wanted to find out what kinds of highly classified materials we were developing for our aviation, for our stealth aircraft, and the like. It's crazy how much effort is put into spying on one another in this world.
Well, okay, we don't want to make the whole show about this, but since I brought up Roswell, since we brought up classified information, since we brought up UFOs, what's the quick and dirty version of what happened at Roswell? Now, the second you say this, there are people who disagree, but I have you on because I'm considering you an expert in the subject. Dr. Clark, what happened at Roswell that you can speak authoritatively on?
Sure. Two things. One, there was unclassified weather balloon research going on, and that's public domain, public knowledge. The part that was not public knowledge then but was later revealed was there was classified experiments put on the weather balloon to detect if there were acoustic sounds from Soviet atomic detonations. This is 1947. We were worried. We knew that they were thinking about developing them, but they weren't there yet. The problem is the weather balloon that crashed, it didn't really become public knowledge for about a few years. And when it did, basically it was a few pieces of wood, some looked like a balloon material, maybe some mylar, and what looked like, or the way it was reported, was hieroglyphics. It was tape.
Wasn't it like floral wallpaper or something like that?
Exactly, and someone claimed it looked like hieroglyphics,
right? Alien writing. Right.
Yes, exactly.
And so, really, it's weather balloon. This is the dumb man's version, in my version. Weather balloons trying to pick up sounds from explosions from Soviets doing nuclear
testing, nuclear testing. Exactly. And very simple, very straightforward.
One crashed, and the whole thing got spun out of that.
And it was interesting because it didn't spin out right away. It spun out years later. People began, once the flying saucer phenomenon occurred, and other people went back and said, oh, that must have been a crash. And the stories changed over time. And this is the thing we document in the work. The story will come out one way, and there was a conflict. I mean, one military unit reported it was weather balloon. Another one said, no, it was something else. And that's where the conflict oh, the government's engaged in cover-up. They're covering it up. No, it's just bureaucratic. Left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. And that's kind of typical. They didn't get their story straight early on, which fueled later a controversy about it.
So because there is classified information involved, then there's, in essence, cover-ups. And so conflicting stories from the government. But people should understand this does not equal little gray aliens.
Or green ones, yes, either ones.
Yeah, didn't end up someone claiming that they had pictures of grays at the facility or something like this? Isn't that kind of how wild it got?
Oh, it got wilder. It even got to the point where they recovered a body. They took it out to Area 51, which is about 70 some odd miles northwest of Las Vegas. And, I don't know if you watch, I see on your walls back there, you like sci-fi, I do too. If you ever watch Independence Day, the first one, Area 51 is where they kept the original alien ship that crashed, right? And and the aliens, right? And this is how the stories spin out. And it's funny because if you look at ufologists, people who are fascinated and write about this, they contradict one another, they add and embellish over time, and when something gets disproven, then it's a new version. And this is the story. You have to follow it over time because it does change.
Now, since then, some people have decided it's a good idea to go hang out at Area 51. What has been going on? Why has it become such a I don't just mean being a tourist attraction, although Roswell's definitely played up on that aspect. What's the deal with people trying to storm the gates?
Yeah, that was interesting. It was a little over a year ago. I don't know if you recall, but there was this movement on Facebook. A fellow by the name of Matty Walters or Matty Roberts. I can't remember his name. But anyway, he posted, let's go storm Area 51. We can Naruto run, which is Japanese anime. We can Naruto run and they can't stop us, I didn't know what Naruto was until I heard about this. So, and what was amazing is they got well over 2 million likes and 600,000 said they were going to go. And it got the FBI and the military concerned. Look, this is a classified research area. We take this seriously. There's more mundane reasons not to go out there. It's a very hot part of the country in September when they wanted to raid. It's extremely hot. There's very few services in town. The population nearby is maybe 80 people. So they don't have even bathrooms.
Right. You don't want to end up with a bunch of dead hippies in the middle of the desert.
Who have to go to the restroom, right?
Okay, so it's still captured the imagination of quite a few people. Now, in relationship to classified information, you mentioned something called Project Bluebook. Can you talk about Project Bluebook?
Sure. Project Bluebook, which eventually the report became known as the Condon Report by the lead scientist. For over 20 years, the U.S. Air Force was tasked with the responsibility, and it makes sense. So the U.S. Air Force was created in 1947 as part of the National Security Act. It became its own institution. Remember, it was the Army Air Corps during World War II. So now as a news service, it's responsible for strategic bombing of the Soviet Union. It's got a strategic thing. And of course, any aerial threats, it has to report and then deal with. So the Air Force was tasked with it under Project Sign and Grudge, and then it became Bluebook. And for over 20 years, they studied probably over 20,000 reports of UFO kind of phenomena. And the conclusion was anywhere from 95 to 99% of it could be explained. The phenomena that was reported could be explained by natural occurring, either weather balloons or high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft, U-2s when they were first flown, and then later the SR-71, they were flying at 60,000 feet when commercial aircraft was around 20,000. And so they were reflecting sunlight well after the sunset, and this created a whole wave of phenomena. Well,
you said U-2s? Do you know,
not the band.
I have a theory on why those U-2s were out there flying around. It's because they still hadn't found what they were looking for. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, but Francis Gary Powers was shot down flying a U-2, so there's a problem with that.
Okay, but keep on going. Serious point. I'm sorry. So basically, it's like it's official secret governmental journal of weird things in the sky.
Well, and actually the report's public. You can go download it. The Government Accountability Office has done reports on it. The CIA has done an unclassified report on its involvement because they were concerned, they're going to hand it off to the Air Force. But if this is a national security threat, and that's why the military unfortunately gets pulled in. Whenever UFO phenomena is reported, they have to at least answer, is it a threat to the United States? Is it a threat to our air forces? And that's kind of what's going on now. I don't know if you know, but in August 4th, there was a task force stood up. They've changed the name from UFO to unidentified aerial phenomena. And the reason why they changed that is they're not sure it's flying. They're not sure they're manned or some living beings in it. The phenomena doesn't behave according to the laws of physics. It does bizarre things like fly 1,500 miles in one direction and then do sharp right angle turns, which would shear apart anything we know, including any human being or any known creature in it. So they behave in phenomena. So they call it UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena.
Exactly. So the ones you're talking about that seem to act in ways that we have not seen craft be able to do. Who exactly observed them? And you see, and do you know which dates are and who and how they are observing these things?
Sure. As early as 1947, I think it was Mr. Arnold in Washington observed 9 what looked like discs flying around Mount Rainier. That was the earliest one. Or before that, after World War II, there was the Foo Fighter, not the band.
Right. You got Foo Fighters, you got U2. What's next? Nickelback?
We got the whole thing. Yeah. The Foo Fighters were these strange aerial phenomena that did not conform to the laws of physics. Some pilots after World War II were observing them, and that was the predecessor for the UFOs. And then later, once science fiction, particularly the movies, start in the 50s, now it becomes flying saucers.
Especially the day the Earth stood still, 1951, it seems. It seems like that aesthetic influenced a lot of what people then thought they were seeing. But you said like Mr. Arnold, Mount Rainier, like, are these government people seeing it or detecting it, or is it the government hears about citizens and takes it seriously? Like who's got one person in the comment section is making a funny comment. Who's got the speed radar? Who is actually observing? You know, you're saying it did this and did that. Who's measuring how fast it's going and it's turning and all that? You see what I'm saying?
Right, yeah. So early on, it was civilians, particularly Mr. Arnold. He was a civilian, but a lot of pilots have. And in particular, since 2015, it's been Navy pilots that have seen a lot that have attacked, like the Nimitz carrier group or their assault. Or recently, you'll see if you go online and there's some whole bunch of reports about, they're showing a radar cockpit of following one of these unidentified aerial phenomena, and you can hear the other pilots talking to each other about this. Wow, look at this! How can they do this? 120-mile-an-hour shear winds, and they're flying without. And they have shown no signs of exhaust, no intake, no manifest exhaust of fuel, no obvious portal to see out. So what is this stuff? And so it can be anyone from civilians to military. What we call it in the book is credible witnesses to incredible phenomena.
Okay.
If that makes sense. In other words, pilots are fairly credible people. They've established a good reputation. They otherwise, don't show any outward signs of irrationality or whatever, instability. And so they're reporting it. So now it's forcing the military to pay attention to these things.
Thomas Gerald maybe is asking about that. It's from the live chat. He says, I hope you guys discuss the Go Fast video that Navy pilot spoke about when the Navy released the vid. Can you speak on that a little more detail?
Yeah, I just was doing that. What's fascinating to me is if you look at that video, I'll be giving a talk to a regional chapter of Reasons to Believe here soon about that. They're looking into they want to ask about the national security implications of this. And what's fascinating is that it too does not conform to the laws of physics. So is it real or is it something else? And that's what we address in the book. And what's fascinating is all of this has been consistent since the late 40s, early to late 40s. None of this has changed. There's no actual evidence of a saucer or alien being or even parts of it. What we have is either eyewitness observations, instrument observations, but even they're contradictory ones. Like people will see it but not be able to record it. In the video, it was infrared. If you remember, or if the person that commented on it, it was an infrared image of this thing. And what's fascinating to me is for the national security implications, what struck me was that it reminded me of a video game. The device, if you watch that video, it looks very much like it. And of course, you hear the pilots commenting about it. But it's fascinating. Is this, if there's a real component, meaning a real I wouldn't say physical, but if there's a real component to it that's a real threat, to me, I wonder if it's cyber threat. If someone's messing with our electronics to try to generate image and try to test our responses to these things as a precursor to attack. Some people have speculated, is it drones? The problem is we know of no drones that can make those kind of maneuvers and fly that fast. There's hypersonic, not drones, but rockets that can do a variety of things, but nothing that can maneuver that quickly and seemingly on command.
So there, people who want to look at this without jumping to the conclusion that you have little gray or little green men inside of a craft, we need to explore a variety of possible options. And I hope you've heard Dr. Clark say, look, a lot of these things can be explained through natural phenomena. Some can't. And even there, notice we got to kind of, you're doing forensics, doing detective work. Like, for example, these can be glitches with equipment or something worse, a cyber attack, as you're mentioning. But this seems like the place to go, because you're mentioning a couple different phenomena. You're saying a couple different things. You haven't necessarily really got into the real but not physical realm or something like that yet, although you briefly touched on it. I guess this really is the time to do that. There's a lot to talk about. We can circle back to some other questions. But these ones that you, from your guys' research, you wrote the book, you guys are following this, see as credible, and you seeing what they're doing, can you talk about that smaller category? And then what you think a biblically palatable explanation for this is, because that's kind of like the essence of it. And I see a couple people in the live chat might be kind of familiar with it. I see a couple people saying that. So let's talk about that.
Sure. So what we do is we go through and look at all the various reports, and even those who are, and I forget, he's a French researcher into UFO, believes this too, and it's not just us, that there's something real but non-physical going on with some of them. Anywhere from 1% to 5% of all this phenomena is probably real but non-physical. And what we mean by non-physical is that it doesn't conform to the laws of physics. And I know some skeptics will say, well, the laws of physics that we know. Well, I'm not a physicist, but my colleague Hugh is, and I know of no physicists that believes, there is this idea of an interdimensional hypothesis, but that really plays into the spiritual component. So let me segue into that. The 1% to 5%, it's probably closer to 1%, real but non-physical. What things are real but non-physical? And one of the things, my wife is a marriage family therapist. She does a lot of research into neuroscience. She deals with trauma. The mind as distinct from the brain. The brain is the physical component, but the mind is separate from the brain. It's real, but non-physical. And very few neuroscience would disagree with that. There are some who, for different reasons will, but a lot of them will say there's something real going on there, that it's non-physical, but yet real. We see that too. From a biblical perspective, we see the spiritual realm as both real yet non-physical. And in particular, we see demonic realm, angelic realm as both real but non-physical. They can interact with us, and they can behave in a way that interacts with us. They can't affect us unless we open our doors to them. And this is where it's really interesting. My colleague Kenneth Samples, who really investigated the contactee and abductee record, these are the ones who claim to have been very close. So you've heard of the alien encounters of the third kind, right? Mm-hmm. The first kind is within 500 feet of an alien event. A second kind is closer to that, where there's some electrical or something happened, like you were shocked by an alien beam or whatever. A third kind is an actual physical abduction or contact with an alien, as reported by those who have been engaged. What's fascinating in the record of those who believe that they were contacted or abducted, virtually all of them had what we call open doors to occultic behavior. And what do I mean by that? Well, anything as innocent as, engaging with tarot cards, fortune telling, Ouija boards, seances, levitation, or some things that are even more sinister, occultic, demonic, satanic type stuff. I wonder if there's not some level of, and I'm not overly fond of this thesis, but it's kind of interesting. That a lot of the video games today are heavily involved with the demonic realm and things like that. Is there some level of openness to the occult from that? Possibly. So our residual UFO, that is the 1 to 5% that remains, incredible phenomenon recorded by credible witnesses, we hypothesize that it is those people who have open doors to the occult. The biggest problem is it's still in a hypothesis because very few people will let you interview them about this. Very few people want to, they'll be surveyed. Do you believe in, or do you know someone who believes in the occultic or into UFOs? And they'll say yes. It's harder to get close to people because of the stigma attached to it. And that's in particular the case with military officers. Very few want to report this because of the stigma attached to reporting and seeing UFOs, when very few people believe in it, credible people.
All right. So how do we think about something that is able to in some way be measured? You can see it, you can gauge its movements, but yet it's spiritual ultimately, because there's some sense in which it would seem physical by that estimation. Why it's this? These are not things that seem to be invisible, and so what's going on there?
Well, let me see if I can give you an illustration. I'm going to use my mind, not my brain, and I'm going to say something, and I want to see if it has a physical effect on you. No. Did you feel that?
Yeah, my dog did too. He was wondering if he shouldn't be on the couch or something.
Isn't that amazing? It's a non-physical but real thing that had a physical effect. And when I do that, not for the purpose of this, but in terms of having people think about how we interpret very little information, it has a physical effect kind of in your body. And that's just one example. So yes, spiritual can affect the physical, and conversely, our physical behavior can affect the spiritual realm. That's the easiest way for me to illustrate it. In the record, which Ken Samples talks about more, there are examples of in close encounters of the second kind where there's physical damage like burn marks and things like that left over, but no physical remains of an alien craft. That is, a person said they saw a craft land here, there's physical burn marks, but there's no evidence of the craft. So there is this apparent realm of the spiritual that can affect the physical. But again, what we found is that almost everyone that has been involved, at least in the contacting abductee, have opened that door to the occult, to the demonic realm. And now here's where what I would think if I were proposing a policy change is that I know that pilots have to have psychological exams. And I don't mean to make this a stigma at all, because I think as a Christian, I would argue that anyone who's experienced negative kind of spiritual stuff, this is an opportunity to kind of say, okay, am I open? Have I opened my own doors to the cult? Did I engage in things that allowed this realm to participate in my life, maybe unwanted? But one of the things that I would encourage the military to do, the psychologists, is to ask those questions in their interview. Have you ever engaged in Ouija boards? Have you, do the kinds of assessment of whether they have those open doors? That would be some of the best evidence that we could probably generate. Again, these are credible human beings, these pilots, but they're seeing incredible phenomena. And again, no one yet can show that they are physical. Even that radar intercept there, infrared radar intercept, they had no known reaction. It didn't affect the aircraft. It did affect the pilots, their minds, and they might have reacted to it, but there was nothing physical there. And so this is an incredible thing, and I'm curious. It may be illegal to ask those questions because of religious freedom and all that, but I would be curious to find out if we could get more evidence on that. I think that would be one way to go through and maybe get some confirmation, or make us adjust our UFO hypothesis.
What would be, if this is essentially demonic activity that we're seeing in these rare cases, What's it's kind of like trying to get inside the mind of a demon. Why would they be doing this? Why are they showing up? And why would this be happening? With the contactees, I've heard reports that they get messages about, let's embrace a one world religion, or Jesus was actually an alien, and this kind of stuff. But people that aren't having this messaging occur, they're simply kind of witnessing some kind of phenomena. Why? You know what I mean? What do we do with it?
That's a good question. I think it's just, if you look at the contactees, abductees, their lives are messed up by this. They suffer from bouts of depression, psychological damage. It affects them for a very long time. So this is not benign phenomena. This may be small scale stuff at this point. If it is the RUFOs that we're talking about, the hypothesis we have, it's messing with people's mind. And they're embarrassed. They don't want to talk about it. It changes how they behave. It's not a benign phenomena, but it's not overtly wickedly evil like you see with the contactee abductee stuff. It's not nearly that extreme. But does it lead into that extreme? And that's a question we don't know, because we don't follow people down the road and ask them those questions. It would be interesting. But the contactee, Kenneth Samples deals with that and shows there's a lot of long-term psychological health damage to people who experience this phenomenon.
Let's turn to the live chat and see what people have for us here, Dr. Clark. Jazzy Bell is trying to sum it up, although you may want to recalibrate this as far as what your thesis actually is, and says fallen angels and or demons masquerading as aliens. Is that in essence what we're saying? For example, we may say masquerading as UFOs, not necessarily aliens, for example. But is that the essence of it?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And what's fascinating is, to carry that forward, it's fascinating, is it didn't become flying saucer or alien ships until sci-fi, until we actually could conceive of going to the moon. Before that, in the 19th century, it was, we used the dirigibles, the big, huge balloons to kind of do reconnaissance over the battlefield during the Civil War. There was a whole series of citations of that all throughout the 19th century that no one could explain again. But throughout other cultures, I mean, if we've got Bigfoot, we've got the abominable snowman. You go to
what's
Puerto
that
Rico,
called? Cryptozoology? Is that what that's called? I think it's called cryptozoology.
I don't think that's crypto. I don't know. I don't know that. I think cryptozoology is, but I'm not sure. I don't know.
Anyways, can't tell you that for sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Exobiology or something, exotic biology. Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
So anyway, it's fascinating because all cultures across all times have some version of it. But it's fascinating is that it's adapted to the culture in which they live. So ours is a much more advanced technological culture. And so the phenomena it manifests itself in more advanced technology. And that's the part that intrigues me, is over time it changes with the culture and the level of technological sophistication.
All right, let's look at the live chat. Carolyn Nunez says, UFOs definitely do not come from faraway star systems. They are indigenous to planet Earth and are part of the spiritual warfare occurring all around us. Comments?
I would agree.
All right. Well, it looks like, Carolyn, Dr. Clark says you nailed it with that there. Liza says, and if you don't know, you don't know, no sweat, but says, I'd like to know his take on the Travis Walton abduction. Anyone here see the Fire in the Sky movie and or documentary about his famous claimed abduction in Arizona in 1975? Is that Ken Samples' area, or?
That's Ken Samples' part. Yeah, I defer to him on that. I apologize. I wish I could answer that. I'm not. He did similar to what you did. He worked for, I don't know if you remember Walter Martin. During that time, back in the 70s, 80s, he did a lot of research for him on occultic phenomena and things like that. And part of it was abductees, contactees, and ufology.
Okay. This is going back to when we were talking about Roswell. Carolyn says, people were confused because they said that there were crash test dummies involved, but they weren't part of any types of experimentation until later on in the 50s, not back in 1947. I think that's a rock group too, Crash Test Dummies. I'm pretty sure it is. We've got U2, we've got the Foo Fighters, and we got the Crash Test Dummies.
I did not know that. You are too hip for me. I'm maybe I just like classical music too much.
I don't know if I'm hip. I'm more of a I'm more of a Christian hip hop guy. But, it's funny because I knew we were going to have a good interview every day today because before we started, the reason we were a little late is because I had to go grab my shades. I was like, hey, I don't have to read anything on today's show. You mind if I go grab my shades? And Dr. Clark says, sure, you're young enough. You can still get away with that and look cool.
I'm too old for that.
That's all right. You got your own glasses on. Thomas Gerald says, what about Bob Lazar's claims?
Bob Lazar, as a ufologist, has a vested interest in supporting the idea, the mythology of this. Yeah, Bob Lazar, there's quite a few. Bob Bigelow. I don't know if you. So recently, I'm going to segue. Apologize, but it parallels what I want to say here. In 2007, Bob Bigelow, who owned his own Bigelow aircraft, was also a big donor to the Harry Reid Senate campaign, who was the Senate Majority Leader for a number of years, pushed him to research into this phenomena. And so Harry Reid set up $22 million. And over a period of 5 years, six different studies were conducted on UFO phenomena, but not just UFO. It was actually beyond that. It was also particle beam technology and electromagnetism and exotic technology. Are there threats to us? Can we take advantage of these exotic technologies? Are they threats to our military superiority? Bob Bigelow also got a contract from that, his company, and has been a big promoter of it. The guy that headed the project, which was, I forget what it was called, ATIP, Advanced Aviation Threat Intercept Program, and that was the name of it. ATIP was for 5 years this effort under the military, under the auspices of the military Department of Defense, to investigate this stuff. They didn't find anything. Again, they found nothing, and this is so similar to Project Bluebook, to Project Sign, Project Grudge before. They found nothing of substance with this, so they pretty much released their findings, and Harry Reid was apologetic. But now recently there's all of a sudden more people come out saying, well, Luis Elizondo headed it, and he was dissatisfied with the government's interest in the research, how they conducted the research. He said there's more there. But again, what? There's no proof. And he said, well, it's forthcoming. We have yet to see that. And it's sort of interesting to me. Go look, don't, I mean, I'm not going to oversimplify it because it's not always the case. There are people who absolutely believe this for reasons that are personal to them. But I also say follow the money. If someone's got a vested financial interest in the outcome one way or the other, it's important to pay attention to that. And I think Bob Bigelow, for example, Luis Elizondo, they both joined this group called To the Stars Academy. They have a series that came out about unidentified, this UFO phenomenon. They made money off of it. Whether it's because they wanted the money or because they absolutely believe it, I don't know. Bob Lazar is in that category as well. And after a while, I'm wanting some physical proof. And until I get physical proof, I'm gonna stick to the hypothesis that this is not real until I see something real.
Aren't there some problems, and if you don't know, it's okay, or if you want to be too nice, that's okay, with Bob Lazar's credibility on some of this? Could you speak on that? Because I think a lot of people are buying into some of what he's saying, but I've picked up some problems in his credibility, but maybe you can talk about that.
I'm going to leave that alone. But I would suggest people be critical thinkers when it comes to the claims by people. And one of the examples I gave is to follow the money. Also be aware of cognitive biases. Some people, even motivational biases. Some people see what they expect to see. That is, they already have a hypothesis that this is real, and so then they see evidence, no matter whether there's evidence there or not. Other people have a need to see that, a motivational bias that comes up, and it's important. I mean, when you evaluate any journal source or any statement by any political leader, what's their bias? What are their assumptions that they're bringing to the table? So I think I'll leave it at that. But yeah, I would say call into question the source, and not be cynical about it, but just ask some good critical questions about the source. What is their bias? What are their motives? And what are they trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I know that Bob Lazar actually claimed the FBI raided him to seize Area 51 alien fuel.
Interesting.
I mean, I'm looking at an article right here. Anyways, well, we won't get too much into that then, but we will turn back to the live chat. What about Dr. David Jacob from Temple University? Do you know who that is?
No, I do not.
Okay, a couple people bringing him up. Lots of names in this thing, it seems, and lots of theories. I can I ask you about this, Dr. Clark? I feel like there's mistakes we can make in this. I tend to be skeptical of these things, and so I have to caution my own self against kind of hand waving it all away and saying, "I don't think so. I don't think so." Mm-hmm. And it does seem like a time and time again when I look into some of these claims different people have made, it's fraudulent. You know, they say they went to school somewhere, they worked somewhere, they didn't, or it turns out they were like a janitor, they didn't have some high level security clearance. Like, you know, I'm trying not to throw anyone under the bus, but this is what I've seen. I've seen other ones where people, you know, if Christian apologists have a problem with all the different versions of the Joseph Smith first vision, because there's multiple versions he gave and they contradict each other, some of these folks give radically different versions of what they say they saw. And a lot of times it seems to grow with the telling. I've seen this happen. I've seen other times where they describe things and then they'll end up drawing it or something, and it'll look literally like almost identical to the cover of a science fiction novel that came out a few years before. These are real things I'm talking about, by the way, everybody. This stuff I'm speaking about. And again, I've seen this time and time again. Or the one where the guy actually constructed a model and took videos of it, and it looked very real. It looked like a real flying saucer. He built a model and took video of it. People doing stuff like this, or, you know, they have photographs and they lose photographs, or they bring an object and the object turns out to be something used in mining. I mean, all this kinds of stuff is really happening with this, and it's turned into it's a little bit of a cottage industry now. And so there's some real issues. So I see that, you know, that's my own thing where I can hand wave. But I see another error where I feel like some Christians, because we recognize spiritual warfare is a reality, we recognize that Satan is real, that demonic activity is real, and things like that. Sometimes I feel like too many, sometimes Christians, not all, but are too quick to kind of jump on everything. Like, all these accounts are real. If they say they were abducted, and it's, you know, and kind of then say, well, it's all a bunch of demons. But the question is, you know, we got to find out, are these accounts real in the first place before we say, well, then it's demons. And so I just wonder if you can kind of speak on sort of discernment in this, because I do concern, you know, I see less people that are kind of like me, maybe the hand waving type, where I have to caution against that. I just feel like I see a lot of Christians are kind of jump on everything, like demons here, demons here, demons here. But how can we be cautious as we approach this? Because very few of us are like ufologists, experts. But how can we be cautious as we approach this and hear new things? Help me that kind of a big picture of that.
So I have a very good friend who is not a Christian who contacted me a week ago, and we spent time. He has, and I told him it sounded like a conspiracy theory, and he goes, "I know, but the facts speak for themselves." And it was, you know, Trump is going to try to mess up the election. It was about the Postal Service. And I said, okay, so let's go look at the evidence. You know, the Postal Service, you know, he said, well, you know, there's going to be fraud. Trump has said there's going to be fraud with the election, or the fraud with the mail-in voting. There's a new guy that's came in June, Lovejoy is his name, who's instituting some changes in the USPS. And he pointed that and said, look, there's an example. He's appointing his one guy to go in and cause this. And this is left and right. I don't mean to pick on him because he's more leftward than I am, not Christian. But what I said was, think about it. What are the alternative hypotheses? Maybe this guy is actually trying to affect change, because we know the Postal Service has been insolvent for years and it expects to go bankrupt by 2022, right? So maybe he's trying to affect change. Well, what's fascinating, within 2 days, there was some evidence that came out. He was not appointed by Trump, that it was the U.S. Postal Service's board that voted unanimously, that he had a great – yes, he was a Trump supporter. He had donated
the president doesn't
Trump.
He's not the one who can do that. He doesn't have the power to do that.
Correct. Yeah. And what's fascinating is this guy is instituting the kinds of changes that the Democrats have been arguing for a long time. So what I pointed out to him was, if you are biased in one direction, and I would say this to your audience – be aware that your bias may be leading you down a path that's not true. And we are supposed to be people of truth, right? People of light, kind of like Daniel. And if I'm going to be I know my cognitive biases where I tend to think things are falling out, just like you were talking about. I tend to be a little skeptical of it, so I'm overly cautious on my skepticism because that could lead me to discount real things. That's why I think our book is helpful for the audience. We are Christians. We're rational, we're trained, we worked in higher education. I've taught for 31 years. One worked at Caltech, one's taught at community colleges. We've all been involved in education, and yet we consider that there's an alternative hypothesis. And we propose it as a hypothesis. We're not saying it's absolute fact. It's a hypothesis that needs to be tested. And unfortunately, we're just figured we're constrained. So I think the caution I would have for all of us, and you talked about it, is that if you know you're strongly inclined for this particular point of view, all right, now consider the alternatives. Where does the evidence lead? Pick apart your hypothesis, push against your own hypothesis. That opens you up to being more thoughtful, more respectful of how different people can interpret different facts differently.
So you're saying we need to be self-conscious and epistemically aware.
There you go. Yes, you said it better than me, dude.
All right.
Good job.
Basic says, Vocab Malone, I have a question. If that's indeed true, now this is earlier when we were talking about some of the government reporting on itself, then this gentleman's statements contradict what the government stating today, that they indeed have footage of UFOs. Who is telling the truth? I'm not sure, Basic, though, because it seemed like, I'm not sure what he meant by that, because the government said they had footage of unidentified flying objects, which you're saying now they've changed to unidentified aerial, UAO?
Phenomena. UAPs.
UAP. So they've changed to UAP.
So that name changed a while ago, long before this.
Okay.
That changed back with the Defense Intelligence Agency sponsored research called ATIP, because they were so fed up with all the controversy comes with UFO, right? The ufologists. The Navy's the one that released this footage. They're not claiming it's real or not real. They're showing the footage because there's some pilots who got angry, and there's some reports. If you go back to Political, you can search this. Some of the pilots were getting frustrated because they were seeing things that they felt like there was a stigma attached to reporting on it. So the Navy eventually, I think a year ago, relaxed regulations on reporting. That is, there will be no stigma attached to you reporting this because we want to investigate it. If there's these, indications, and like I said, if there's a real component to this, meaning a real national security component, we should be investigating this. And I think it's part of that whole thing. If it's a cyber kind of threat, that's interfering with our instrumentation and trying to see how we respond to learn our tactics, techniques, and technologies, then that's a real threat that needs to be addressed. And that's why I'm in favor of them investigating it. But I want a whole complete investigation. If it's a spiritual component, then I would like to see some tests that could be done. And like I said, just survey questions through the psych test that goes on all the time with are you involved with any occultic activity? Just let's be open to all of the evidence, not just some of it. And so I don't think I was contradicting myself. I think maybe the Basic misunderstood what I was saying.
Yeah, I think he was saying you were contradicting what the government was saying. I think that's what he was saying at certain points. Yeah. Okay, well, now I saw a number of people in the live chat say that could this be private? Could some of this be explained by private individuals? Like you see it in like some kind of private experimentation or something like that, like engineers or what have you. Is that a possibility, or is there any evidence of that? In some cases, because I understand it's not one size fits all. It's explanations for depending on circumstances.
Yeah. So one of my a former colleague, a guy that worked part-time with us for years, is one of the first to actually do research into private people pointing laser pointers at pilots coming into San Diego. Mm-hmm. So there could be some of that, but that's the only known thing that I'm aware of. But we do know that, for example, terrorist groups have now targeted drones. They actually have drones, and they're actually trying to interfere with flight patterns of U.S. aircraft in the Middle East and areas where they operate, and interfere with our drone operations or overhead imagery and things like that. Could it be? It could be, but there's high penalty. I mean, if you know, whenever there's a wildfire, and there's wildfires all over right now, right? People are throwing drones up, and the Forest Service has to shut down the fire things. I mean, this is illegal activity. If you get caught, you can be in serious trouble. So to me, it would take a very highly paid or well-resourced actor to be able to, especially if it's a cyber attack of some kind. That to me looks like a nation state, either Russia or China.
Okay, so
Probably
that's my
not,
next
not
question.
Iran, North Korea. Yeah.
Could any of this be Chinese or Russian craft? Not just cyber. Could it actually be something that's craft, like in some of the cases? Could it be that?
That's what they looked at for years, and that was the main area of focus. Was it real physical aircraft? Were they advanced aircraft by either the Soviets, the Russians, or the Chinese? In no case, however, did they find any of it to be real.
Okay.
And I'm talking about from Sign, Grudge, Facebook, the ATIP exploration, other reports. The Naval Intelligence has been, since Office of Naval Intelligence has been managing the latest series from this. That's why I think if it's real, if it's a nation state threat, it is cyber. And Russia is extremely sophisticated at it. China has a ton of resources to throw at it. They have over what they call 75 what are called advanced persistent threats. These are actors, groups that persistently try to penetrate commerce, military technology, our government, our infrastructure. You name it, all of our power grids, our dams, our electrical sources. And there's over 75 identified APTs, or advanced persistent threats, on China's part. And the most advanced ones are probably Russian, most specific with advanced technology, but both are very strongly involved in this region. So that's why I think if there's a national security component to this, or a threat component to it, I believe it'll come from that realm more than an actual physical, because you can create hypersonic craft, but again, it can't do those maneuvers without physically destroying itself. It's no way. If you look at asteroids, when they come in, or meteors, they shatter upon impact in our atmosphere with gravitational pull and things. So there's very little way that a physical craft could manage it.
I don't want to sound crazy, but what about the possibility of some of this being anti-gravitational device experimentation?
Well, I guess you could, but again, how do you avoid all the other constraints of physics?
I don't know. I've heard
levitation, anti-gravity being a levitation, but again, then going through space and cutting sharp corners, there's too many other physical effects that go on, because it's not just gravitation, but velocity, mass, and all that.
All right. I.B. McFly says they are programming people to buy the alien deception when in reality they are fallen angels. Do you think anyone anywhere has a vested interest in getting people to believe in aliens, and that some way that could relate to spiritual warfare?
That's a complicated question. That's multiple parts. Yes, there's people who have a vested interest in believing in them. It sells. It sells products. It sells TV shows. It sells series. But
more nefarious intentions.
Yeah, I think demonic realm is very nefarious. I think they're not benign, is the way I would put it. They're malign, not benign. So yeah, they have a vested interest in us enough. I mean, why wouldn't they? Get us fascinated with the occult. They have us at their fingertips, as it were.
So they would be actual demons themselves.
Negative spiritual forces, yes. Yes, demonic realm. Fallen angels.
See, I could see that with contactees. I still don't fully understand that in regards to what appear to be craft. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, so let me see if I can phrase it the way I heard it. If you want something bad enough, you get it bad. If you really want phenomena, alien life to exist, and it's not real, let's say, you could get it bad. If you want something so bad, you're willing to give anything, including your soul, for it. It can. So it will appeal to what we want. And that's why I think it's fascinating. Over time, this weird, strange phenomena that doesn't have a real component appeals to the culture and the technology of the civilization. And everywhere around the world, it has its own version of this. So I think it's because it's been hyped up. I mean, think about, what was it, 1997, the Heaven's Gate, the cult?
Yeah.
Committed suicide to go to the mothership. I mean, they bought into it, and look, isn't that exactly what the demonic realm wants? Suicide, mass suicide. That's why I say it's not benign, the stuff.
And they're not the only ones like that, in the sense of a sort of a UFO-based religion. The Raelians.
Oh, yes.
They're mentioned in the book. I think it's in Sample's spot. The part he wrote there, but there's that. Now, I want to circle back. I think when you mentioned about exposing yourself to demonic activity, I think some people misunderstood what you're saying when you said innocent and you're talking about tarot cards. I think what Dr. Clark was saying is things that are seemingly innocent. He wasn't saying they're actually innocuous. That was his point. I see a couple people that I think mistook what he was saying there. He was saying these things that seem innocent people get involved with, they're actually dangerous to themselves. Am I correct in that?
I appreciate that, because that is correct. I would not want to be misunderstood. When I mentioned this at church, one woman came up to me afterwards and said, you're absolutely right, because she was involved in a levitation and it scared the bejeebers out of her. And she didn't learn until later that she needed to, renounce that, repent of that, and submit her life to the control of Christ to really fully recover from that experience. So yes, it may look innocuous, but it's not.
Yeah, okay, excellent. Thank you. Carm M, shout out to Little C. She's a supporter. And I see we got Rox B. She is as well. Shout out to Nate. He's in the house. Carm asked this question: is there a good UFO documentary he can recommend? Because there's a lot of, this is my comment, not hers. There's a lot of junk information, just junk when it comes to this. Is there anything good on this subject you could recommend? As far as video, anything like that?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with a really good one. I mean, except for one that we did on ours. So I'm sorry, that sounds like
what is it? What is
it?
Talk about it. What is it?
It's on the book, The Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men. I think we have a video component that's like a teaching aid with that, but we don't have I don't know of a good documentary that isn't usually promoting the ideas of aliens and things like that. I know of no good one.
Now, so I understand there's different creation research ministries. They don't all agree on everything. So this is just me. So Gary Bates has a book on this subject, and I understand that not everyone who gets into this agrees with each other. But just let me say this for me. The miniature movie that CMI put out, Creation Ministries International, is about an hour long. I liked a lot of it. Not all of it, but the thing is, there's not a lot to choose from when it comes to Christian material on the subject. So this is not Dr. Clark just saying this. I'm saying I would recommend the one that I've seen, besides what Dr. Clark recommended, by Gary Bates in the Creation Ministry. It's a download. You can get it. It's like about an hour long. Pretty good production quality. Again, don't agree with everything. Dr. Michael Heiser has one as well. And you guys know I've sat down with Heiser, and I like him. I don't agree with all his stuff on this either. Again, I don't claim to be expert. He's not someone I would necessarily want to debate on it. But he has one on, I think it's called UFOs and Demons. I think maybe the first half of it to be really good. The second half is where he got into some kind of different kind of stuff. But I still would say it's worth watching because, again, there's kind of slim pickings. Now, I remember seeing, Dr. Clark, a conference on this by Christian apologists, put together, I think, by Guy Malone. Do you know what I'm talking about? This is a while ago, and they did it in New Mexico, and it had a number of folks there, because it's weird because I've seen some Christians who are into this, and they end up looking to me kind of weird. They start talking about crystal skulls and in little fairy aliens and stuff that I just don't think we can buy. And so it sounds like you're not even. It sounds like you haven't went into some of the deep water.
So honestly, this it's funny because I get picked to do a lot of these talks on this stuff. It's not my area of interest. I really want to see more about Daniel, more about the positive. This is more of a defense because we have done work on it. And when I look at it, the whole UFO phenomena, it's not something that fascinates me. It's something I do. I believe it's part of our apologetic ministry, but I do it more reluctantly. It's not like I said, I'm far more interested in the life of Daniel and how it relates to us as an example of how to walk Christ-like in our modern era. To me, that's far more interesting. I'm also interested in, in national security. And this, like I said, over time doesn't show to be real, but, it's fascinating for people who might be trapped in the occult or might be trapped or have an open doors to the occult. I think we need to have a good apologetic for it. And UFO phenomena has been one of those things that people seem to either get really fascinated by or completely skeptical of. And I just caution people, we have the true light, Jesus Christ. The UFO phenomena is not the light for the universe. It's not the encyclopedia of Galactica of all knowledge. We have that in the words of the Scripture, right? And I think that's where my heart lies, and I think that's where your heart lies. So, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
A few more questions, and we'll call it a close here. Dave McNall says UFOs come from another dimension. Would you say that accords with your guys' understanding of the theory?
Correct.
All right, go ahead. You're going to elaborate?
No, I mean, the extra-dimensional hypothesis or the trans-dimensional is the one that Hugh addresses, and I would encourage him to look at that because he deals with it with a lot of good insight from a physicist and astronomer's perspective.
All right. Okay, so if we could, bring things to a close, help Christians look at this, because there's going to be, future stuff with this. There's going to be new stuff with this. What kind of things do you think you can say to help Christians? I think you've mentioned some of this already, but to really think through whatever comes down the pike theologically, but also sober-minded. How can we really make sure that we do that? And I do think reading your guys' book is actually part of that. You get information, you understand better, you grow. I do agree with that. But final words.
Yeah, sure. I think, equip yourself. The Christians, 1 Peter 3:15 says, always be prepared to give a defense, yet with gentleness, respect, and a clear conscience. We need to be prepared. If 50% of Americans know someone or has seen the occult or knows the UFOs or sees them or believes in them, that means people we run across are going to be curious about this, and we should be prepared. So I say one of the steps is to read the book. The other is to be humble and to be respectful of other people when they disagree, including with me. You don't have to agree with everything I say in the book, and I don't have to agree with you. Let's be respectful. Let's have, Christians should be the ones leading the civil discourse in this country, not the obnoxious discourse that we see. And that would mean then asking questions, being gentle with the questions about when you have someone, and then ask that question at some point. Have you ever been involved with anything like tarot cards or Ouija board? Ask about their childhood. A lot of people innocently in pajama parties, for girls anyway, get involved with this stuff, and they don't mean anything by it, but that leaves an open door. And if there is an open door, you need to help them see that if they're truly interested in getting some help as a Christian, and then be prepared to give them the gospel of Jesus Christ, because that's the only transforming power that will change your life for the better.
Excellent. Well, that's a good way to end with the gospel. And people can find more of your material at reasons.org. Is this correct?
That is correct. Absolutely.
All right. And I appreciate you joining us. You got a wealth of information on this topic and kind of approach it from a balanced approach, and I appreciate that. And just shout out to your guys' ministry, and shout out to you, Dr. Clark, and look forward to the Daniel stuff when that drops. Thank you very much for joining us today on Street Apologist.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's good to see you.
Yes, sir. God bless.